So we did this big terrace experiment, and we didn't have access to a bulldozer. It was just a track hoe and a skid steer. Okay. And so we created, you know, this whole thing was gently sloped, and it is insane how much more usable the space is now that we have these flat areas. Like, you know, people throughout history have been making terraces, and making retaining walls is just so much work. I lived in Spain years and years and years ago and worked in some of the terraces that had been made over many, many generations that had stone walls, and those were amazing, but I'm not, I don't have the stone here, and the amount of work is just crazy. So I really pushed it with the steepness of these banks. The grade is much steeper than what is usually seen as acceptable, but I planted them right away, and they haven't eroded. And I planted them with a variety of wildflowers and various like retention plants and legumes and stuff. And then, so when we did the terracing, these terraces were just clay. Like, there was no way to be able to scrape the topsoil aside and spread it back over, because we didn't have a bulldozer, and because we were creating more surface area than was there originally. Just because of the scale of what we were doing, it's very different than over there. And so it was just clay. And I was thinking about buying topsoil, but there's all sorts of issues with that, because the topsoil can have pests in it that can cause major problems. And so I embarked on this big soil building experiment. And so what we did, I had a connection with a local landscaper, and they brought me several loads, many loads of somewhat decomposed wood chips. And it was only $30 a load for this dump truck, which was great. And so first we put down a layer of wood chips, which we used a skid steer to spread. And then we got these round bales of hay. And at the time, they're more expensive now, but I got them for 30 bucks each. And we rolled those out over the wood chips. And then I spread just between 1 and 2 inches of composted horse manure over the entire thing, and sowed, this was all happening in September, I sowed Austrian winter peas into it, and winter rye. And over the winter rye didn't really do much, which is crazy, because winter rye is usually very aggressive. But the winter peas went crazy, and they're leguminous, so they were able to do much better in that subsoil that was all carbon. And then the next year, I pulled off, or when I put in a shovel to see what had happened, things had massively changed. And so that all of that carboniferous matter was turned into topsoil. Isn't this amazing? And so there's between 6 and 8 inches of gorgeous topsoil throughout this whole area on both of these 2 bottom terraces. And you can see the worms, it's just teeming with worms. There's like 3 worms in this one handful. Yeah, it's just phenomenal. You know, it was all just an experiment, and I think, you know, of all the work that I've done over the years, like starting gatherings, starting Wild Abundance, teaching hundreds of people earth skills and carpentry and skills for empowerment, this experiment to me, which has just been like kind of this side thing that I have going on, and was really inspired by COVID, because I was like, oh no, we need a lot more space to grow tons of food. And I think it's one of the biggest accomplishments of my life. Like, massive soil building is a really big deal. And when you take the soil from the paths and you turn it into the beds, we're talking about a lot of topsoil. So it's just gorgeous. So what I did after that first year was I bought this DeWitt woven plastic, which I'm not so big on plastic products, but this is one that has a lifetime warranty. You know, it's supposed to last for a really, really long time. And so I feel much better about the embedded energy in it if it's going to last forever. So I used that. First, we crimped the cover crop by using a T-post and 2 people. So each person puts the T-post around one of their feet. And so pretend that there's a fence post, a metal fence post between my foot and your foot. And then we both tie it onto our feet, and then we step in unison, and that crimps down the plant matter. Then you cover it with this stuff, and that kills the cover crop. And then once the cover crop is killed back, then you can just rake off whatever crop debris there is. And I mean, look at this beautiful mycorrhizae that's going on here. It's just like, so it's like creating massive amount of compost. So then that nitrogenous plant matter and all of that carbon have just basically made a massive amount of compost covering this whole large area. And so then you rake that back, and then you can either plant another round of cover crop, or you can make beds or whatever. What I did was I grew that first round of cover crop because I wasn't in a big hurry. This was like a long-term project. It wasn't about having space to grow food right now. It's about having space to grow food over time, which if you take that approach with preparing garden areas, you're going to have a lot more results for a lot less labor and a lot less resources. And so I grew that first round, which was basically just Austrian winter pea. And then I smothered that, used occultation, which is what it is when you kill things using a dark, opaque material. And then we sowed sorghum, Sudan grass, and cowpeas in it last summer, and then smothered that. I didn't have a chance in the season to plant again in the fall, so I just left this on all winter, and then now I'm making it into beds. And it's just, I mean, each of these beds takes about 20 to 40 minutes to make, which is like incredible. And the soil is just gorgeous. And so, yeah, I'm just like over the moon with how easy this is. I mean, it's easier to make a whole new bed given this scenario than it is just to prepare a bed that has had like cover crop or weeds growing in it over the winter. So I'm thrilled with this method, and I think it could, like, hay and wood chips are something that are very available in rural areas. And so this could be a way of building soil in a moist area like this that, yeah, it has a lot of potential.